Welcome back. Time for our GMC Sierra tweet of the night. It comes from The Score. NBA money is insane. Salary per year, Jason Tatum, $62.8 million per season. The entire Anaheim Ducks roster as of July 1st, $58.3 million. In case those of you who didn't know, Jason Tatum got a contract extension, the biggest contract extension in league history, $62.8 million per year. That just sounds absolutely insane. But that is the world we live in the world of sports. Chris Mueller joining me right now in the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call. Chris, I don't want to talk about NBA salaries, but we do want to get more into the Pirates. They beat the Cardinals tonight, 5-4 in 10 innings. And to help us talk about that, got to go to the legend, Chuck in Uniontown. You're on the Nightly Sports Call.
Thanks, fellas. Nice fourth to you, but tonight's win only reaches its fulfillment if we win tomorrow. And it doesn't stop there. We need to take at least 3 out of 4 from the Mets. And because realize that it's not only the other teams in Central Division we're competing with for a wild card, we're competing with about 4 or 5 other teams outside the division. And you have to keep pouring it on because every one of these teams is in about the same boat. They're going to be winning too. So you have to just keep winning and winning. But 3 out of 4 from the Mets would be almost imperative because we have to gain some ground on them. But
Chuck, it underscores a point. It underscores a point what you're saying about get on a roll. This team hasn't won or lost more than 2 games in a row since sometime in mid-May. And now with Jared Jones having this right lat issue that got him pulled from this game after having had his last start skipped, they're saying abundance of caution. He's saying I could have kept pitching if I had to, but that would have been dumb. He's saying it's not anything to be worried about. Okay. But if he maybe has another start skipped, it just becomes tougher for them to string together victories. But they really have been that consistently, I guess, inconsistent. It's, oh, no, we suck again. And then, oh, my God, we are so back. Watch out, world. Like, that's been the Pirates in 2-game spurts either way. This would have been 3 losses in a row for them had they not found a way to get it done. I'm willing to bet that they'll probably win tomorrow. Then they'll probably drop a game or 2 against the Mets. Then they'll probably win a game or 2 to finish that series, and we'll keep going round and round. But you know where that leaves you, Josh. If you keep doing that long enough, you end up being the team that goes 78-84 and misses the wild card by, I don't know, 6 games because you couldn't string together a couple of wins more than 2 very often.
That's exactly what I'm thinking in the exact same scenario. And I think Chuck has a great point. And he brings up something more important as far as this weekend and what they face the Mets. They've got 4 games with the Mets. And up until maybe dating back a couple weeks ago, the Mets might be the hottest team in baseball. So they started partying with Grimace and started winning games. If you know, you know. But you got the Mets coming in here, and if you can do anything, you got to throw some cold water on that team. I think Chuck is right. I think you got to win. You try to hope to win 3 or 4 to gain some ground on them because they have really been hot recently. You got to try to find a way to slow them down. And to your point also, you got to try to string some wins together. And I've talked so much about even if you can't string wins together, you got to win series. Before they got into that rut last week, they had won, I think, 4 out of 5 series. They were stringing wins together, and they were winning more than they were losing. You can't take 2 steps forward and then take 2 steps back. You got to keep moving in the right direction if you want to try to stay in this within the next month or even at the end of this month when the trade deadline comes to a close. Got a great question on Twitter from Sean, Chris, who says, give a grade on Kyle Dubas so far with the Pens offseason. He's going C-. He said he tried to add some players last season, but they didn't pan out. And so far this offseason, he's not too impressed. Your grade on Kyle Dubas, I know it's a couple days into free agency, but your grade so far.
I mean, it is probably about a C-, a slightly below average job, but I think the greater story there, or the more relevant story there is Kyle Dubas seems to innately understand, even only after 1 year of watching this team that he put together, that the Penguins are much further away from contending for anything of significance than the Penguins players themselves do, or specifically Sidney Crosby does, or maybe FSG does, or maybe Mike Sullivan does. The GM seems to be seeing this clearly, and yet the preponderance of no movement clauses on this team's roster here makes them untankable You can't break them down without their expressed written consent. You know, it's like one of those old things you'd get at the end of a baseball game. You can't reproduce, rebroadcast, or anything, whatever. You can't retool, retank, whatever, rebuild the Penguins without the express written consent of these several players who literally cannot be moved without their say-so. And so I think we're going to live in this weird, squishy middle. We did this with Neil Huntington years and years ago. He was going to contend right then and there. That was the goal. But the goal was also to keep one foot in the future, and that rarely left fans happy. I do think this is the start of it, if you're a Penguins fan, of understanding how much of the rest of the league lives year in and year out. You're just not going to make huge splashy moves because you really can't. The team isn't good enough, just be honest about this. They're not good enough, even with an improved power play, to be a real playoff contender. And it's going to be this way for a couple more years. So I know it sounds bleak, that sounds grim, but it almost feels irrelevant what Kyle Dubas does specifically this offseason, Josh, because there's so little hope for real change with this team as long as things are constructed contractually the way that they are.
Chris, I'm going to sum up pretty much the cosign, if you will, and everything you just said, just using one particular example. When you hear the news about the signing of Sebastian Aho, and your first reaction was it the good one or the bad one? And you find out it wasn't the good one, it kind of sums up how you look at everything. Is really more of a microcosm, but to your point, it is really hard to try to see this team do anything bigger than a C- when, you know, the biggest thing that could have probably risen that grade in the past couple of days was an overture to Vladimir Tarasenko, and he goes off and signs somewhere else for less than $5 million a season, and you wonder, well, if that's the case, how much more of a shot do you have to bring in anybody else that can help this team progress any further? So you might be looking at that squishy middle that you're talking about for not just this offseason, maybe going into the next one as well, and that's
Josh,
totally independent of what happens with Sidney Crosby's contract.
Well, the thing is, Tarasenko goes to Detroit for 2 years, $9.5 million, and I've said this numerous times already in the 3 days of free agency. They are no longer an attractive destination writ large. It maybe would be attractive to certain players to play on Sidney Crosby's wing because it's Sidney Crosby, but for many, many years, the Penguins could merely make an offer to a free agent that they might want and say, we're the Penguins. Why wouldn't you do this? And now, I'm not saying they have to pay like almost a tax here to get guys to come to this team, but they can't really sign them anyway. And guys want to go elsewhere. Would you want to go to Detroit? I would, compared to Pittsburgh. That's a team on the rise. Florida's re-signing people. Edmonton's more desirable. This is what happens. All your best players are in their mid to late 30s. This is how it's supposed to go in salary-capped leagues, and it's going that way for the Penguins. And by the way, to backtrack 5 minutes, we know that the New York Mets have gotten on a tear since they had Grimace throw out the first pitch and they partied with Grimace. Is the Hamburglar available to do same such for the Pirates? That is my question.
That is an excellent question. Yeah, I would definitely take the Hamburger. I don't think Mayor McCheese is available. So, yeah, we'll definitely have to go Hamburger with that one. He's definitely more of a pirate in the sense of the McDonald's characters. I think that's
He steals things. He steals things. He's a pirate by nature.
Plunder the cheeseburgers, right? Right next to the locks that Kutch got in the ESPN commercial. Plunder the cheeseburgers. We got to take a break. We'll try to stay off the rails when we come back. Stick around. In the meantime, Chris Mueller is here with me. Chris, if you had the opportunity to peruse MLB.com earlier today, around noon, a story went up there, and the title is "The Case for Paul Skeens to Start the All-Star Game." Where do you fall? Do you buy a case for Paul Skeens to start an All-Star Game? Are you selling it, and why?
I would buy it. I mean, I don't know if Pirates fans who are very closely monitoring and attached to his innings count, knowing that it probably has a pretty finite cap on it, would want him to throw even 1 or 2 innings in that game. But baseball has a problem that it shares sometimes with hockey. Now, baseball still has crazy salaries like Ohtani's, even though all that money is deferred, Josh. But the NBA, why does Jason Tatum, in one respect, get crazy money to tie this all together? Well, it's because they have a pretty good TV deal in the NBA, a really good one. Why do they have a good TV deal? The sport is more popular, but the sport's more popular than, say, hockey because it markets its stars. That's one reason that the NBA is more popular. It's a star-driven league. Baseball has, way too often and for too long, almost minimized its stars or failed to figure out the best way to get them front and center. Paul Skeens is the most exciting young player in the game right now, definitely the most exciting young pitcher, legitimately good enough to be deserving of this honor of his own volition, just independent of all of this. If you're baseball, what are you doing other than making a very smart business move by having last year's #1 overall pick start the All-Star game? Baseball, it's fun. There can be fast impacts. Look, here's Paul Skeens. He has a mustache. He throws 102. Did you meet his girlfriend? She's very famous and has lots of Instagram followers. Like, it actually makes sense for baseball, and that is, of course, why it has no chance of happening.
You brought up a really good point when you talked about the NBA and why it's popular. You talked about that TV deal. Why does it feel like MLB's TV deal's going in the opposite direction? Why are there Roku-only games going on? Why are there certain independent games going on that are only available on Apple TV and services that a lot of fans cannot get to or choose not to subscribe to? It becomes a question of what direction you're going in. And Will Leach, I believe his name is, the author of that piece on MLB.com, he brought up a good point that amplifies what you say. The case he made was Pedro Martinez in 1999 when the All-Star game was in Boston. Pedro was one of the hottest pitchers in baseball. He goes in, puts on a show, and just shuts dudes down for 3 innings and totally set the tone for what that game was going to be in Boston. It feels like the perfect opportunity to put a guy like Paul Skeens, like you mentioned, #1 overall pick last season, has a famous girlfriend, pretty much gone viral for a shirt that she wore with her boyfriend's name and one of his teammates on it. It's just one of those things where it just turns into super immediate marketing for MLB, and like you said, it's the perfect reason why they're probably not going to do it. But all the same, it just makes the case for them to at least try it, Chris.
Yeah, it makes the case to try it, but I wonder if they'll go bold here. I mean, he's obviously an all-star on merits. He's got probably best stuff, maybe not best stuff in the game, but close to it. It's something that you want to see. People want to see the players they've been hearing a lot about. I know you can watch them now thanks to MLB Extra Innings or MLB.TV, excuse me. You can see them anywhere. It doesn't have the old mystique that it did even back in the mid-90s, but it's still cool to see a guy like that going up against the best in the AL. At least that's what I would say, personally.
Not only is it helpful to see a guy like that in the All-Star game, but here's why we're talking about everything we talked about at the beginning of the show, Chris, because it's helpful and it's good for the league and it's good for fans to see a guy like that in the postseason. You want to see a Paul Skeens and a Jared Jones and a Mitch Keller go up against another team's 3 best pitchers in October and see how well they can do and see how far they can go. And if you don't see that in the postseason, that kind of hurts maybe the overall exposure to the game and how fans can be interested in all of that. But we are out of time. For the time being, Chris Mueller, always glad to have him. For Chris Mueller, for our producer Jeremiah Miller, and our team here at KDKA, I'm Josh Taylor saying enjoy your Independence Day holiday tomorrow, and we'll see you right back here